Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's start our meeting, as we always do, with the pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God
Bless America, land that our law, stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
A moment of inspiration from Barb.
I have a couple here that I looked up, especially in honor of our speaker today. The first one is from Sidney Sheldon. My heroes are those who risk their lives every day to protect our world and make it a better place. Police, firefighters, and members of the armed forces. Another one here from George Patton, General George Patton. The duties of an officer are safety, honor, and welfare of your country first. The honor, welfare, and comfort of the men in your command second, and the officer's own ease, comfort, and safety is last. One from Barbara Boxer. Law enforcement officers are never off duty. They are dedicated public servants who are sworn to protect public safety at any time and place that the peace is threatened. They need all the help that they can get. And one last one from an unknown person. Cops work for a cause, not applause.
Today we have the honor and the pleasure of hearing from somebody that I think we all know. Captain Carl Scalzo has been a part of our police officers of the year ceremony. Chief. Did I say that?
One chief, next chief.
Chief Carl Scalzo has been a part of our police officer of the year award meetings. Well, he's been chief for 11 years, so at least 11 years he's been a party to that. So we've kind of gotten to know him, and we certainly have gotten to know the individual officers that have been recognized each year for their heroism or just dedication to keeping our city safe. What we haven't heard until recently, at least with the write-up that was in the paper following Heritage Day, was what our police officers in Easton have to deal with on a daily basis. I sat down with Carl a while ago, and we discussed what policing is like in Easton in today's environment. Now, Walt, myself, both former Easton police officers, but I know that our police work and our policing back then was completely different from what the men and women on the Easton Police Department do today. After I talked to the chief, I asked him, would he be willing to come in and discuss it in a more open setting with our club? And without hesitation, agreed to do that. Chief Carl Scalzo has been on the department for 25 years. As I said, he's been the chief for 11 years. And what I didn't know, and this will be an interesting point of interest, is he has a bachelor's degree from Temple. Would anybody like to guess what his degree is in? Civil engineering. History. Civil engineering. He's a civil engineer. Wow.
That's what he's doing.
He also has a master's degree from Arizona State. But I won't take up any more of his time because I'm sure we're all interested in hearing from Carl on what's happening today in the Easton Police Department. So with that, I'd like to welcome Chief Carl Scalzo.
How do you do, Chief Scalzo? How do you do? How do you do, Chief Scalzo? How do you do? We are with you at hand, and we'll do everything we can. How do you do, Chief Scalzo? How do you do?
That was very nice. Hopefully everybody's okay if I stand up here and talk. I'm a little bit more comfortable kind of moving around a little bit, especially, like I said, being Italian, I like to use my hands a lot. So thank you, everybody, for having me come out and talk to you today. It's an absolute privilege and honor to come out and talk a little bit about the department, about the city, where I see things heading. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we have happened in the city, things that occurred, some of the comments that I made, which were very well publicized, both video and written, and just kind of look and talk about where I see the department, where I see society, where I see our community heading, and give my optimistic outlook as to where I think we end up with all of this. So I kind of sat down over the past week knowing that I was coming up to talk to everybody. And I wrote down all these things I wanted to say, and I had a speech kind of that I was prepared. And as I kind of got through it, I thought, you know what, I'd rather just sit here and talk. I know everybody here so well. I've sat before you. I've spoken to you so many times over my time as captain and as chief. And so I thought, I'm just going to come up here and basically talk to you all from the heart, let everybody know kind of what I'm thinking. And then if anybody has any questions about what we're doing as a department or any questions of me on anything, I'll try to answer them the best I can for you. So I thought that'd be a little bit better of a format than just stand before you and read a prepared speech of sorts. So what I'd like to do is start off, talk just a little bit about my career and about kind of where I come from, and maybe that help explain my stance on a lot of things. Like Chief said, I've been with the department now for about 25 years. I've been in law enforcement for actually 30 years. I did 5 years in Baltimore County after Temple, and then came back home here. I was born and raised in the city of Easton. Other than those 5 years, I've been here my whole life. I've actually I grew up on College Hill where I could see the WEX light flashing, and I currently live in a house from my bathroom window. I can still see that same light flashing. So I literally lived in that little bit of a circumference there, but I've been in Easton my entire life, and I've been extremely proud to be able to say that. Been with the department 25 years. I've been a sergeant on patrol. I've been obviously a patrolman for many years. I was a sergeant on patrol, lieutenant on patrol. I was lieutenant of professional standards, a captain of administrative services, a captain of field services, and the chief for 11, just shy of half of my career with Easton. So I ended up getting promoted pretty young to chief, and I've been very blessed and fortunate with the department that I have and the city that I'm in. And it's been, I think, going extremely well, and I'm very, very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in. I've absolutely loved every minute of it. My father, if I could take a moment to talk a little bit about him, my father, also born and raised in the city of Easton, a graduate of Easton High School. He actually was also a police officer. He started sometime around 1955, did about 21 years, and retired from the Easton Police Department as a captain in 1979 when I was 9 years old, was when he actually left the department. And my sister, who was a very, very talented attorney, she actually passed away back in 2016. My sister was an attorney. She was actually a district attorney. She was actually under John Morganelli, his first deputy. So kind of like the supervisor at that next level. So she was about 10 years here in Northampton County as a district attorney. And she did a lot for victims' rights, victim advocate, those types of things, especially as it related to domestic violence. She ultimately left that job and worked for the federal government, where she trained military attorneys to help them identify and prosecute domestic violence cases. So that was kind of her love. But she spent 10 years here in Northampton County as a district attorney. And the reason I tell you all this about myself and my family is when you see me speak, especially about things like what occurred at Heritage Day, one of the things I got a lot of was, my gosh, you seem so upset. You seem so passionate about it. You seem like it meant so much to you. And I think that when you hear about me and my family, and you think that my family's been involved in law enforcement, some level of it, whether it be going after criminals, or whether it be trying to keep the citizens and the visitors safe, or prosecuting crimes. We've been involved for 65 years. In this one community, whether it be Northampton County or the city as a whole. So whenever things like that happen, I do take them very, very personally. They mean more to me than just, oh, we got another shooting, or we have another homicide, or another assault. Let's figure out how to solve those things. I take it very, very personally, and they weigh on me. And my job is constantly trying to figure out how to make sure those things don't happen again. So ultimately, we had the incident that occurred on Heritage Day, where we had a shooting that occurred. And for those who don't know the story of all of it, I'm going to just kind of briefly go over what actually happened, what happened to me personally, what happened with our officers, and then what happened in the incident. And then, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about a path forward. But on this particular night, Heritage Day, we had some trouble early on. with some young kids coming down on bikes. We were really struggling with dealing with them. And there was a level, the way I expressed it when I spoke, was a level of disrespect from the kids that I hadn't really encountered, or encountering more and more as of late, which is concerning to me. And as the night grew on and we moved down to the drive for the fireworks, ultimately we ended up down there where we ended up having about 3 groups of about 15 kids that had come down and we're kind of walking around. And for those, you can kind of maybe understand what I'm saying. They were just walking around looking for trouble. You knew that something was wrong. They looked angry. There was a lot of yelling and screaming amongst themselves in the groups as they walked around. And we knew, and I was getting feedback as officer in charge from my men and from my officers, that something was not right here. There was something going on and we just didn't know exactly what it was. So we just tried to monitor this and keep control of it. And as I saw one of these groups walking towards me, screaming down, they had face coverings on, and you just kind of could sense something was on. As I tried to kind of engage them. And again, we're bound by a lot of set of rules that we follow in the Easton Police Department. That's how we interact, engage. If we're going to detain somebody, we have to have reasonable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. Those types of things have to be in place. And we take that very seriously when we start engaging people, and especially if we're going to try to detain them. So what we typically do is mere encounter. We try to like, hey, how, what's going on? And I got met at that time, excuse me, I got met at that time with a bunch of things hurled at me as far as different names that I was called, different things that were alleged of me. And one of those words was I was called a racist. Just right off the bat, not knowing me and not knowing who I was or even what I was, trying to accomplish. And I say that, and I'll explain that further, why that's an important thing. So when those words and those types of things were getting yelled, you tend to take a step back because nobody wants to be called that. It's a horrible thing to be accused of. And I felt very much that way. I know who I am. I know who my family is. I know what I stand for. But even in that moment, it still puts you back on your heels a little bit. So as I tried to engage, all of this kind of happened. These kids continued on their way. And I made the decision at that time, let's just take a step back, keep an eye on things. We'll monitor these groups and we'll prevent them from engaging or fighting. And that should be enough to keep everybody safe. Well, as you're well aware, it was not. We were not 20 yards away from a group of individuals. I heard some yelling. I look up, I hear 3 shots get fired. I see one of the individuals go down, a 15-year-old kid. So I'm 20 yards away. I run to the kid, I grab him, we try to find out where he was shot, and quickly you could see the blood pouring out into the gutter where we were laying with him, right out in front of the Eastonian on Northampton Street. So there were other officers in the area too, because we were all trying to control the situation, and they came running over as well. And Officer Eric Campbell was there, and we quickly determined that he was shot in the leg, which can be very quickly, you can bleed out if hitting the femoral artery and obviously died. Eric Campbell got a tourniquet, got it on his leg quickly, got that cinched down to stop the bleeding. So we stayed there with him. You could see this individual, again, a young kid. He was scared. He was, wasn't really sure what was going on. He was in and out of consciousness, and we thought we were going to lose him. I mean, obviously there was a lot of blood. Then EMS got there. He was very fortunate. EMS was so close because of Heritage Day. So EMS was right down the road. They got there quickly. We cut the clothes off. We got him in, found out where the wound was. They started to treat him. They got him in the ambulance. Officer Meg Stallnecker, she jumped in. She actually drove the ambulance so that the paramedics could continue to work on him in the back of the ambulance. So that individual leaves. We process the crime scene, and you go into this mode when those things happen, where everything is just work. What do we have to do? Do we have any witnesses? Is anybody else hurt? There was a family of 3 with a young girl, a husband, wife, and a young girl. They had to dive on her as the shots were fired. They were that close to it down that way, and so I witnessed that, made sure they were okay. And off he went. And by the grace of God, the young boy survived. And he will have a chance at a life beyond this instance, and hopefully beyond all of these things that he's involved in. I can say the individual, the victim in this case, we have dealt with him in the past. We have had trouble with him in different aspects. So we knew who he was, but he will have a chance at life because of the work and because of what these officers did that day to save his life. But I remember thinking at that moment that something's got to change. Something has to change. And not knowing exactly what that was in the moment, I just knew something had to change. So when I had the chance to speak of the incident in a very passionate way, obviously, like I said, it's been told to me numerous times, I basically kind of let everybody know exactly what I was thinking. And when I realized something had to change, I realized that there's 3 things that we needed to do. And the very first one was we had to identify the problem. What is the problem that's occurring in our community, in our society, within our police department? What is the problem here that's created, or what's going on? We have to be able to identify it, and we have to be able to say those words out loud, that this is what the problem is and this is what needs to change. From my perspective, the problem is somewhere along the way, and I don't know where it's happened, police have started to become villainized. Now, I say this with what I say next. I don't include everybody. It's not every person. It's not every group, because apparently I offended a lot of people with the things that I said. Because everybody assumes I'm talking about everybody. I'm just talking about generalities. So somewhere along the way, police have become villainized, where we have been identified as the problem. Like, for some reason, when things are happening, whether it be a rape, a robbery, any type of crime, it's no longer the victim or no longer the suspect or the offender's fault. It's now the police, it's society, it's the schools, it's the systems, it's all of these other things. And what we've created is an environment, again, this is my opinion, we've created an environment that allows for offenders that are going out and committing crimes to basically fall back on saying, not my fault. And then on top of that, so we've created that, and then we create a system that holds no consequences for any of the actions that are occurring. So when individuals are arrested for crimes, there's a big push to no cash bail, get them back out onto the street. And I understand the value of why people want to do that. But what I see after 30 years in law enforcement is, when somebody ends up going to jail, sometimes that's what they need to get away from drug addiction. Sometimes it's what they need to get away from violent friends and gang members that they hang around with. Sometimes it's what they need to get a pause from if there's violence going on. By them being away from that situation cools, so that when they do rehabilitate and come out, that ultimately that situation is not fresh and still there. So I do think a lot of the systems and the programs that are in place, whether it be low sentences for some of the criminals that are out there, especially violent criminals. I know in the schools that there's a lot of issues with a lot of the young kids. And the way I've looked at it is, I think that we have the responsibility as adults to set up the guardrails for these young kids and say, this is what's acceptable and this is what is not. And I feel like we're no longer doing that. I feel like we're allowing these kids to basically do and say and act however they want to act. And if we even try to engage, then words like racism comes out and those types of things. And then we take a step back, and then I have a 16 or 15-year-old kid on the ground, shot in the leg, clinging to life. And for me, I just found it very, very troublesome, because all I ever want to do is save that kid. Like, I don't care about any of the other things that are going on. I want to save the kid that was laying there with me that day. And so that was the first thing I tried to do, was just identify, hey, listen, we have to start being able to step up and say, we're not going to tolerate these behaviors. We're not going to tolerate crime in the city of Easton. I can't control the country. I can't control even the state, but I can control how we look at crime in the city of Easton. And so that was the first thing I wanted to say. And then the second thing I thought we needed to do was make sure we at the Easton Police Department are doing everything the right way. And by do everything the right way, I mean making sure our policies and our procedures are absolutely as sound as they can be. Making sure that we are following those policies and procedures. We are an accredited police department through the Pennsylvania Law Enforcement Accreditation Commission, and we have been so for 15 years now. We have just reached what they call premier status in that organization under that accreditation standard, and we are one of 2% of departments who can claim that. So we're very, very proud of that. So I make sure that we're doing things by best practices possible. I make sure that we have body cameras on every single officer. So everything that we do out there is recorded and can be looked back on. So if there is any allegation that our officers are doing something wrong, I can see that. I will hold our officers accountable when they do things wrong. We have in-car cameras for the same purpose. So we have a citizen complaint procedure that allows the citizens of the city to let me know if our officers are not treating everybody with professionalism, everybody with respect. And that's regardless of race, sex, orientation, any of those things. We treat everybody with respect, dignity, and professionalism. And we record those interactions so that there's no dispute that we are doing those things the right way. So I feel very confident that we as a department have done what we need to do to be able to go out and do the job effectively without the worry of any of those different types of allegations after the fact, because we can sit down and we can show anybody what we're doing. So the third thing is, we need to work with the community. We need to work with the citizens. We need to work with organizations like yours to make sure that we as a group become stronger, that we have the support. And I thank you as I stand here. You guys have always been extremely supportive of us as a law enforcement agency. And we try to work hard with all of these different organizations, the Boys and Girls Club. We try to work hard with the different organizations, that the Block Watch organizations, and those types that are community-based organizations, where we can basically build a rapport. We can basically build that level of trust and respect amongst the citizens of the city. I believe, as I stand here, that everybody wants to be safe in their community. I don't think that anybody would ever dispute that. And I think when you see the things that can occur or the direction that we're heading, that there are some people who are extremely concerned. But I would say this, that as I speak to my law enforcement colleagues, there are many of us now who are kind of putting our foot in the ground and saying, okay, listen, we understand that there are changes that need to happen. And I'm a big believer in accreditation. I think every department in this country should have some sort of accreditation body that oversees what these law enforcement agencies are doing, and making sure they're doing things the right way. I'm a big believer in body cameras because I believe that it takes away the objective or the subjectiveness of incidents. When people say that something happened, unprofessionalism or even worse, we can see those things. So I'm not disputing that we can always be better at what we do. But I do know that law enforcement across the country now is kind of stepping up and saying what I said, which is we in law enforcement are the good guys. We're the ones out there. We're the ones that are basically trying every single day to keep everybody safe. And, you know, one of the things I said that I know upset a lot of people was when I was sitting there with this young 15-year-old and I looked around, there's all of this rhetoric and all these other things that you hear and you see on the news. There was nobody else there. There's just police. There's just myself and my officers putting tourniquets on with blood all over them. It's my officers that are giving Narcan because people are overdosing on fentanyl. We use Narcan multiple times a week to save people from killing themselves with fentanyl. I don't think people fully can understand it because once we spray Narcan in someone's nose, it immediately wakes them up and the effects are completely gone. So you don't hear that, but we're using that. If Narcan did not exist and we didn't have it and we weren't prepared to go get to these individuals quickly and administer it, people would be dying. Like weekly, you'd have multiple deaths from fentanyl. That's how potent it is. It's now being targeted towards children. It's being packaged and colored, and it looks like candy now, and it's being targeted towards children. So there are a lot of things, and there are a lot of major concerns and problems that we in law enforcement are forced to address. And so when I hear a lot of the things that go on and the things, you know, the defund the police movement and those types of things, it is frustrating. But I promise you, that law enforcement agencies, and I can speak specifically for Easton, we have stepped up to the plate to do the job that we do. It is our intention to basically keep every single one of you, every single citizen, every single visitor that comes to the city of Easton safe. And we're never going to apologize for that. We're never going to shy away from that. We're going to do everything the right way. We will hold up our end of the bargain and do everything the right way to make sure you all feel safe in your homes, to be able to do the things you want, to be free in the city of Easton without worrying of fear of being, you know, assaulted or robbed or those things. And there's a saying that I'm sure you've all heard, and it's one that I take very seriously, that I, as the chief of police, will forever be more worried about doing my job than keeping my job, which means I'm not worried about the things that I say. I will always be respectful. I will always be optimistic as to where I think the country, where I think the city, where I think we're heading, and continue to work hard to be a part of that solution rather than a part of the problem. But we will always do the job of protecting the citizens of the city of Easton to the best of our ability. And my officers know that. They know that that's what I expect of them. We continue to be proactive. We have never changed a thing, where I know a lot of departments have over the course of, you know, we've had the protests and we've had a lot of those things go on as the demand for change has, or that cry has risen. But we have never had to change much of what we've done. You know, when there was a cry for a thing called 8 Can't Wait, which were 8 policies that they wanted to see in law enforcement's policy and procedures. We had 7 of those in prior to ever being mentioned by anyone. We had 7 of those policies of those 8. And the 8th one, which was a duty to intervene, was added almost immediately and now is included in our policy manual. So we will continue to get better, make no mistake about it. We will continue to work with community groups and minority groups like leaders like the NAACP. We work with them frequently, and we're going to continue to do those things to get better as a department. But I guess what I stand here before you all today to say is, you know, that the Easton Police Department is there to keep everybody safe, and they're going to continue to do that as long as I'm in charge, and I feel very comfortable long after. It's an honor for us to basically serve the citizens of the city of Easton. And again, you know, what happened on Heritage Day, we hope to never have happen again. And not because of the comments that I made, but because, again, to stand there and watch young children hurt each other, kill each other, it has to stop. And I think it has to stop from a mutually agreed upon position of this type of behavior cannot be tolerated. And I think that if we can all find our way there, as it gets out more so people can see and hear of what's going on, I think that's just going to make us a stronger, better community, and a better society. And so that's kind of where I hope and I see us all going. So all of that being said, does anybody have any questions about any of those things or anything I can answer? Chief?
Chief, two questions. Have you seen that the majority of the youth that are getting into trouble come from broken homes? One question. And the second question is, we hear a lot on the news about no cash bail. Is that a problem in Northampton County?
The first answer is there is a lot of documentation and studies that show that children who come from two-parent families do better. That I'm not saying, I'm not making that up. That is actually documented that children will do better. And I can tell you that not necessarily in this instance, I don't know all of the kids involved on Heritage Day, but the ones that we deal with trouble very often are from broken families, and moreover than just broken families as far as, one parent, those types of things, because they can too be successful, but it more comes from just the lack of either discipline or consequence, or, or they're just kind of out there. And I actually said this in my remarks that a lot of times these kids are pushed out onto the street. They find themselves engaged in gang activity. They find themselves engaged in groups of individuals who are getting into trouble. And then it's up to us as the police to try to kind of set those consequences and try to almost parent them into saying, these are the things you can and can't do. So yes, I mean, I would say yes, that a lot of them are from broken families. And I think that it does create a problem for some of these young kids. These are children and they are going to make mistakes. The problem is the mistakes that we all made going back years ago as kids are very different than the mistakes that are being made today. And social media is not helping with any of this, because what happens is when I was in high school, somebody would say something, I would say something. Next thing you know, you have a fist fight and it all ends and you're friends in 3 days. But nowadays, somebody says something, it gets posted on social media. And as far as that individual who had it said about him knows, the whole world is now seeing it. So everybody's telling this kid, oh man, he did this, and that builds and it builds and it builds until that kid grabs a gun and shoots the other kid because of it. It's over issues like girlfriends. It's over somebody said something about someone's family member. Those are the things that we're finding are resulting in young kids losing their lives. It's not as much in Easton as over turf anymore and drug dealing and those things, although drugs and violent crime go hand in hand, as we all know. But it is these young kids are making mistakes, as all young kids would do. And I do believe in my heart that a lot of the adults, the ones who are supposed to be setting up these guardrails, protecting these kids and telling them what is going to be acceptable and what's not, I feel like we're dropping the ball. And we're basically giving these kids excuses as to why these things aren't their fault, or why these things, you do that and this is why you did it, as opposed to saying, no, you don't do it. Like I said, my father was in law enforcement for 21 years. I was 9 years old. I had a very healthy fear of my father. So I knew what I could or could not do. And I knew what, and long past when he was retired, that healthy fear remained. Up until the day my father passed, I had a very healthy fear. I loved him to death, but I knew what was right, what was wrong, what I could not do. And I knew the consequences of my actions. So I made decisions as a child with those things in mind. I don't think some of these kids today have those consequences posed to them, whether it be criminal justice system. A young kid that gets involved for something in the criminal justice system, the thought that we just need to get them through and out isn't necessarily best serving that child. And I think maybe that's where we're dropping the ball, where I don't know that we're doing the things that best serve these kids. I think that we're doing things that are good talking points. I think we're doing things that people think other people want to hear, but sometimes a kid needs to get involved in the system for doing something minor so he doesn't do something major. It seems like a lot of times it's only when somebody kills somebody and now 2 lives are thrown away, where now the criminal justice system says, well, there's nothing we can do now. Now you're in jail for the rest of your life. And I think that that's too late, in my personal opinion. I think there's more we can do, and organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, and there's more that we can do. But a lot of these kids, and we talked about this at one of the NAACP meetings, a lot of the kids that I deal with aren't kids who are looking or going to get these types of resources. So one of the things we discussed with the NAACP is, when we identify kids that we think are heading down a wrong path, we want to communicate that to some of the leaders, some of the individuals who have tremendous reputations here in the city, Bill Houston, Al Jones, some of the individuals who have the respect of the community to say, listen, can you get to this kid and try to save him from himself, get to his family, get to people who can maybe talk some sense into where this individual's heading and stop him from heading down this road, because this child isn't going to the Boys and Girls Club, or this child isn't going to Shiloh Church's functions or activities. And so he's just kind of left out there. So, again, a lot of what I say, comes from a place of true compassion and caring for these kids, these victims. And I even look at the shooters and the ones being shot, they're all victims. They're all kids that all find themselves in this position where they're just making horrible decisions. And none of us as adults, all of these systems put in place right now are more worried about the optics, I believe, than actually doing something to protect these kids from each other. And that's kind of, and again, I don't know how eloquently I said it during my initial press conference, but that's really where I'm coming from. As a police department, that's my goal, is to prevent these kids from hurting each other any further, regardless of the allegations that they make towards us, the things they say at us, the names they call us. We're going to do that job, and we're going to protect the kids, because we do truly care about it. We do truly care about the kids, that we deal with out there on the streets, and want to make sure that they don't find themselves in harm's way. We want to point them towards organizations, and see if we can't help them. And what was your second question? The no cash bail, in my personal opinion, is a horrible idea. Getting people out of prison, like I said, when we have a fight, I'll give you an example. When we have a fight and there's guns and things like that involved, the shooting, let's say, and we make an arrest. And again, what a no cash bail is for, and the crimes seem to be growing. As I hear, the different things that are being said as to what they would give a no cash bail for. And I understand the thought process behind it is that you shouldn't be able to get out of jail if you have money, but not get out of jail if you don't. But what we see on the street as law enforcement, and again, this is with 30 years of experience, what I'm now seeing is when we have violent or we have these encounters occur, and you let somebody right back out of jail after they go in, oftentimes that situation continues to escalate. It continues to grow down the road. Sometimes you need to be able to put somebody into a prison system and say, stay there until this calms down. So when you do get out, you're not right back into it, and then somebody else gets shot or hurt, or something else like that happens. Same thing with drugs. People are fentanyl and these drugs that are out there are so highly addictive. And as horrible as I know prison sounds sometimes, and there are millions of stories, I shouldn't say much, there's many stories out there where people will tell you prison is what I needed to get clean. Prison is what I needed to get off these drugs. And so, although I think maybe there are instances where a cash bail type thing may be warranted, I can tell you, as the blanket system that's being put in place from a law enforcement perspective, it is not good for what we're trying to do, because we find ourselves dealing with those individuals over and over and over again between the first crime and the time that they actually go to trial, which could be upwards of a year sometimes. So I think in that stance, I'm probably on the opposite side of many who do believe that getting people in and out of the prison system quickly is more important than the value that comes from what that separation. But from where I stand and from my profession and what we deal with, we deal with the same individuals, the same names over and over and over again many times. So the cash bail has created a big problem for us, and I think it's I just don't think I think it's something that just does not work. That's my personal opinion and my professional opinion on it.
Chief,
Yes.
with the city of Easton having these many weekend festivals,
Yes.
and then you look at the city of Bethlehem with their week-long money fest, music festival, excuse me.
Yes.
Money fest.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I said it for a reason.
I understand.
The county gets involved with their mobile communications up on the bridge and everything.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got a million people spread out over a week trying to offset this. And of course, they've got the matted patrol officers walking through. Would any of that filter down to this weekend events the city has to try to improve situations?
Yeah, we actually, believe it or not, and that's one of the things I really didn't touch on. The stance that I sit here and talk to you about today has never changed for me. So I'm not here today saying, hey, this is something new, how I feel. Since the day I came on in law enforcement, and since the day I took over as chief back in 2012, and for as long as I've done this job, I feel the exact same way about dealing with individuals who commit crime, and also how I feel about the direction where the city's headed. The city of Easton, going back 11 years ago, had over about 1,075, almost 1,100 Part 1 UCR crimes, which are violent crimes, rapes, robberies, homicides, ag assaults. We had 1,100 of those. Last year, we had 423. So I stand here and I espouse my beliefs on these things and my view of how I approach law enforcement, but I'm fortunate to be able to say that that view has seemed to be effective in the city. We were told that doing raids when we had the drug, that wasn't going to work. And you know, we get all that information as to what will and won't work. But we believe that by holding individuals accountable, if you come to the city of Easton, make no mistake about it, and you deal drugs, we're going to identify you as quick as we can. We're going to get a search warrant. We're going to come in. We're going to get the drugs. We're going to get you, and we're going to get you out of the city. That's just how I feel about it. And people are like, well, it's drugs. But with those drugs, and you can look at a million other studies, will tell you violent crime comes with drugs. That's where I think most of the violent crime in the city of Easton was coming. In 1996, I think they were over 2,000 part one. That dropped to 1,700 in, I want to say, 06 to, like I said, 1,100 in back in about 2011, and we're down to 421. So the approach that we take it isn't going to change. We're going to do everything right, but it's not going to change. The special events, to answer your question, are phenomenal in the city. We actually do, we work really hard, you know, because we do worry about things like people driving into the craziness that you're seeing all over the country. So make no mistake about it, we as a department are as prepared as we can be to keep everybody safe in these festivals. And we really didn't have or don't have much issues. One of the things that got a little conflated, and it was unintentional on my part, was they talked about the kids on the bikes. I actually did in my press conference. And the kids on the bikes, other than being disrespectful and not listening to us, weren't really creating a problem as far as violent crime go. Now, just don't get me wrong, they were disrespectful. They basically could care less what we said, and they just, you know, did what they did, which I'm not necessarily used to. But they were there during the festival. We have since put in place an ordinance which said, hey, listen, you can ride your bikes to the city, and we're going to make it. And we've been working with some bike organizations to give these kids some outlets. But when we have 1,000 people, 10,000 people for a festival, you can't ride your bikes through here. It's just dangerous for everybody. Yeah. One of the kids did a wheelie and almost landed on a baby carriage because you can't steer the bike when you're doing a wheelie. I mean, you could control which way, but you can't steer it like you can with the front wheel on the ground. So we put some things in place now that give us as law enforcement officers a tool to say, listen, you can't have your bikes there, you have to walk them. And if they don't listen now, well, then we can take some action to get them off the bike and get them out of the festival. So we don't think that we're going to have very many issues with those types of things. The festivals down here have been absolutely great, and we love to see them, and we work really hard to keep them safe. But we do work with the county sometimes, though, if we do need any extra resources, we try to do that. But again, we are trying to now just make sure that as we move forward, and again, a big part of communicating to all of you and communicating when I did in the press conference is, yes, I want the citizens and I want the visitors that come there to know how hard we're working as a department and how we feel about the obligation to keep everybody safe. But I also want individuals who think about coming here and committing crimes to know how we feel about them coming here and committing crimes as a police department. And I can tell you that it actually, just from making the comments I made, the bike situation got 80% better just from saying, we're not going to tolerate the bikes anymore. Kids were saying, like, they're like, we're not riding. We're not going to do that anymore. We're not going into the parking garage and jumping all over stuff because we don't want to lose our bikes. And nothing even happened. All I said was, we're going to look into figuring out how to stop this. And just from me saying that, it kind of curbed it a little bit. And kids thought, well, there are going to be some consequences. I don't want those consequences, so I'm going to change my behavior. And that's really what it's about. When you put things in place and there's consequences, people will basically change their behavior based on the consequences that lay before them. Just like me as a kid. My friends want to go steal gum at the food lane. My dad would kill me, and I don't mean kill me, I mean stop my heart. I don't go to the food lane and steal gum. So you think of the consequences and you think of what you're going to do. You adjust. When there are no consequences, then we just have a free-for-all, and the kids don't care, the criminals don't care, people that are committing these crimes don't care, because they feel like there will be no consequence for my action. And I think that is, in a nutshell, the big problem we're having. So I do believe, though, as it continues on, it's going to have to, the pendulum will have to swing back, because good, hardworking citizens don't want that. They don't want to have to worry about their kids out, you know, and being assaulted or being, you know, robbed or assaulted or threatened or any of those things. So I do think at some point we will have to find some common ground on how to approach it. But I do think the success, as you see what's going on in Philadelphia, you see what's going on in New York, and you see these crime rates blowing up. The city of Easton, knock on wood, and I say by the grace of God, has not experienced that. But I do believe it's the hard work of the men and women of the department and the approach that has not changed for years under my command. We haven't changed a thing. And that's for two reasons. One is I felt like we were doing it the right way before all this started, which makes it a lot easier to not have to change. And two is I do believe it's effective. And I think the numbers as far as violent crime kind of bear that out. Yep.
So how, first of all, thanks for. all you
Oh,
do.
it's my pleasure.
I see these cruisers at night driving around thinking, I'm glad I'm going home and not going to that guy's home. But, anyway, your candidate flow.
Yes.
New officers coming in.
Yep.
How is that being, is that being impacted by, I mean, obviously in New York, Philadelphia, even in military,
It is very challenging. I heard Philadelphia has like academies with like 20 people in them, things like that, which are very, very low numbers. And there's one thing I should say here too, and I oftentimes forget to say it, is the city of Easton is extremely fortunate to have Mayor Panto as the mayor, Lou Campos as the city administrator, to have the leadership in place that they do. And I say that not politically, I say that because as a law enforcement agency, there's been a lot of pressure on political leaders to kind of do things as it pertains to law enforcement. And I can tell you that every single step of the way, Mayor Panto and the city administration, Lou Campos and all of them have supported this department. Now, again, we hold up our end of the bargain and we do things right, but they have been nothing but supportive. To that end, we have a very good contract in place as far as the working conditions. We have a brand new $8 million police facility, state-of-the-art facility with indoor range and a TI virtual training facility. And we have second to none when it comes to equipment, whether it be vehicles or the training. We send our guys all over to get the best training. So with all of that in place, believe it or not, we are a 63-man allocated department for the city. We currently have 62 people employed. We have right now 2 in the academy, 1's out on field training, and we're currently in the process of hiring 1 more off of our list to go to the January academy. And he's actually the next one on the list potentially has Act 120, which means he may not have to go. So for all intents and purposes, we could be fully staffed by January. So to answer your question, no, we haven't. And I think that's because of a lot of things. I think one, it's because of the department we are. I think it's because of what we represent. I think the reputation as a professional department really does impact people's decisions to come to us. I think the support from the mayor and the city administration as it pertains to contractual things and making sure that the officers are compensated fairly and have great benefits and those types of things. Great facility. I think all of that makes us very, very unique right now. I can tell you it's a big problem getting people hired because people are questioning whether or not this is a profession they want to do right now. It's a little bit of a scary time for law enforcement because what they say to me is it's one of the only jobs where you can go to work, make a mistake and have your entire life spiral around you. Not only, with consequences that would happen as an officer, but also in the public eye. And so our officers find themselves, and again, I can't stress enough how appreciative I am. And I know that you are in this room and how appreciative society should be for these law enforcement officers across this country who go out there day and night and do this job right now. It is arguably one of the most difficult jobs. We have over 1,000-page policy manual right now that's in place, 1,000 pages that they need to know as far as making split-second decisions. They have to know the crimes code, the vehicle code, all of our policies and procedures. They're recorded every single, imagine having to record yourself all day, everything you say and do. And then they're making split-second decisions, which they know are going to be scrutinized by a team of lawyers behind the scenes, literally combing through books, trying to find somewhere that they went wrong. And these officers go out there and they do that job. And I'm not saying that they aren't compensated well, but there's nobody that's rich on my department. And I can tell you that they go out there because they love the city, they love the citizens, and they really want to protect and serve. And they do it, in my department specifically, I can tell you, they do it with great pride and honor, and they do a phenomenal job. And everybody should be extremely appreciative for the work that those guys do. I'm not out there any longer, and I sit back in awe of what some of these officers do. Even on that day, watching these officers move around, I'm sitting there with this kid, and we're trying to figure all these out. And you sit there in awe of these officers and the job that they do. They are professionals, and the city of Easton is very fortunate to have the department that they do, because these officers, they certainly deserve that level of recognition. So we're fortunate that we are close to fully staffed, though. So we are very fortunate. Sir.
Do you encourage your officers to get involved in the community? And if so, how?
Sure. And we do. We actually have, the way we're set up, we used to be set up with what they call the problem-oriented policing, which was community. We have a community police division. It's headed up by Lieutenant Dan Bonham. And it also has a sergeant in there as well. They do a lot of things, but community policing is one of them. So what we ultimately do is one of the big areas that we focus on is the engagement of the community outside the vehicle through issues and things like bike patrol, walking patrols, with the community groups. We would go up to the Boys and Girls Club, or we would go to the different civic centers and those types of things when there are events going on. So we try to stay involved in all of that. I personally worked with Dr. Simonia with the Medici Club up at the middle school to try to work with kids. Those are kids that they identify that are kind of on that fence and want to make sure that they head in the right direction. And so, so there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of different ways. I mean, we go to all of the different, like when they have the fundraisers and things like that, we try to show up the church community groups. So we're everywhere. We're everywhere. And in all honesty, anywhere anyone asks us to be, we go without hesitation because we think it's important. We really do. But through that organization or through that division in my department, we make sure that we are engaged and in touch with the community. We're a member of the Block Watch, we do the steering committees with the business, the downtown business organizations, the Westward business organizations. And then, like I said, predominantly, I have found that the biggest way to engage with the community is having them out there on the bikes and on foot. People just engage more with us when we're in that capacity. People are more comfortable to walk up to us and talk to us. And so we do those types of things as well. And then, like I said, a lot of what we do, you have to remember too, is community engagement. We work the football games. So we see everybody at these football games up in the West Ward, and we work the special events where everybody's coming down into the city and we see a lot of the community there. For years, we ran wrestling tournaments. We did the basketball thing over at over on the South Side. And so, like I said, we try to work with Shiloh Church when they have their community meetings. A lot of times they'll split those up into adults upstairs and kids downstairs. So we try to actually engage with both of them in different capacities because they have different questions. A lot of what we do is kind of geared towards that engagement and that understanding. One of the things we're in the process of doing, and it's been a long process and there's been a lot of reasons for it. Last year, we had announced that one of the things we're trying to do is a victim advocate for our department. And we're just now in the process of getting ready to put that out for advertisement in hopes to have somebody in place and hired by the beginning of next year. It's taken this whole year to kind of try to figure out what that best looked like. It kind of changed from what we initially had thought. So, but that victim advocate is going to ensure that anybody who is the victim of a crime in the city has access to all the resource. It's actually also a community liaison. To work with the different groups. There's a thing called Handle with Care. Whenever a child's involved in some sort of victim capacity, we make sure we notify the schools so that they know that these children are coming in having dealt with some sort of adverse incident. So there's a bunch of different things like that, but the victim advocate, I think, is going to be essential to basically with that outreach side of it as well, making sure that that our department there is a county victim advocate, but I do think that having somebody more directly attached to the city, making sure the citizens of the city have that individual working for them, because the county can get kind of lost as it's much larger. So that's kind of how we kind of handle those situations.
I'm familiar with the Cops and Kids program.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's very heartwarming to see police officers come in and read books to children.
Sure.
And that's a very, I don't know how to word it, it's very character producing
Mhm.
for the children to see and have an officer come in and actually relate to the child.
Absolutely. Yep.
In a non-threatening way.
Yep. And I think that's actually, there's no doubt about it. It is very rewarding for us as well. And we've done that for a very long time. Like we used to do it. I don't know if I think they stopped doing the Dr. Seuss, and I think maybe they're starting doing it again. There were some issues with Dr. Seuss, I guess. I'm not really sure, but we did that for a long time. There was something with them. I don't know, something going on. But so they stopped doing it. And then they started doing, I think they started doing that again. But the Cops and Kids with Judy Dickerson, we work very closely with them in their reading rooms. And, a lot of times too, it's we try to get out there as much as we can. But as you can tell from all the things I'm talking about, we just ask that if there's ever a need, and I would say that to this organization as well, for us, it is literally a phone call away. But it's important to make the phone call because that's how it gets on our radar and we make sure that we're where we need to be. And it's the same thing for the Cops and Kids and the same thing for all of that. Like anytime Judy would need anything from us, we're there. We'd be there for her. Anytime, Dean would need anything up there, the Boys and Girls, whether it be canine demonstrations, whatever it is where we can engage. A lot of our officers coach. Many of them live in the suburbs. Like I coached for 10 years. I coached football, I coached wrestling at a very young level, 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. And you find that connection that you make with those kids. And a lot of times kids are looking for someone to look up to. They're looking for someone to not disappoint. And I think in those roles, whether it be through the cops and kids or through hanging out at the clubs with the kids, sometimes we as police can be that person that they don't want to disappoint. So that's an important part, I think, of these kids, being brought up as well. So
I think that's very important.
I do too. Yep.
I just wanted to say thank you. I don't know if Chris knew that the Easton Opioid Awareness Task Force reached out to the police force when we first initiated it, and Judge Weber and Officer Bonham were right on and attending most of the meetings that we had. So thank you for your your support and getting them to participate and be there. I mean, they were willing to do anything that we asked. So
Great.
Judge Weber, I mean, he went on to be much more of even an advocate for early childhood too. And so anyway, so thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for doing
And Lieutenant Bonham is the kind of the face where he'll come out, and if more resources are needed, then he as a lieutenant has the ability to get whatever resources, whether it be officers, equipment, whatever it would be, to basically, make sure those resources are available. And we do things with the schools. We'll do demonstrations with the schools. Sometimes we'll bring our tax team out where the kids can kind of jump around the gear and get inside the Bearcat and do those different things. And again, we find all of those interactions very, very valuable as far as, and I've said this many, many times, and I said it during when they had the George Floyd protests. People asked, man, things went really well here in the city. And we had people march and we dealt with all of that. And we had our officers out there, and the reality of it was, though, we know so many people in the community. The way that we patrol, our officers move from sector to sector. No officer works the same sector every day. And by moving them around sector to sector, they get to know so many people in the community. So when a bad incident happens, that relationship that you have, those relationships with the community that you have, that's where they become extremely valuable. So we could stand down there, and as people were marching, we knew many, many, many of them, and they would all come over and talk to us and say, oh, thank you so much. And hey, we don't think you guys, whatever it would be, but we knew we had that strong relationship. Those relationships have to be built when things are good. They cannot be built in the face of some sort of adversarial issue going on. At that point, to go ask for some sort of, concession, it doesn't work. People see right through it. So you have to build those relationships when things are good, and we try to do that.
Chief, you could be up here all afternoon.
I love it.
But your meal is
It's no-
getting cold. So why don't you come back and have your lunch?
I just want to say thank you again. I appreciate you guys having me here. And anytime, and whenever you would like, I am more than willing. I could have any of my officers come and talk to you as well. Anything like that at all. It really is just a phone call away. So I just stress that. Do not hesitate to call us for whatever you need.
Chief, I just got a notification on here. I don't know if you can read the lower right-hand corner.
Shop with a Cop program in December. So donate. Oh, that's interesting. Yes, we could absolutely do that. Our FOP does something like that now. And so, what's that? I went to school, Chuck. Yeah, so if that's a Chuck, I know.
Yeah.
It's Chuck. Oh, all right, very good. I know Chuck. But yes, we absolutely can do that. So I have my email. I'll make sure I can get it, and then we can set that up. But I appreciate that. That's great.
In person.
There's Chuck. How you doing, Chuck?
He will donate.
That's right.
Turn off his mic if he wants to talk.
Yes, it's a great,
I went to high school with Chuck.
Did you
Yes.
really?
Yep.
Oh, that's
Yep.
cool.
Yes.
Does anybody on the screen up there
Have any questions?
anything to say?
Ken always has something.
Actually, I did have a question. I didn't want to hold you up much longer, but I
That's
wondered
okay.
if you have any regular interactions with the police departments in the region, and if so, how you coordinate with each other.
We do. We actually, at a high level, we meet every month. Myself and the chiefs of all the other departments, Palmer, Forks, the school district police. We have a very close relationship. Many of those officers work for the city of Easton. So when Perkansky was there, obviously he was a lieutenant with us. And then obviously O'Malley was a lieutenant. Castelline was a captain with us. So we have very good relationships over the years. But myself, Wayne, John, Chris Meehan from Wilson, we meet at a high level every month, at least once a month. But we also work together training and doing those different types of things as well. We actually allow the school district to come down and do some of the training with us in our range and our defensive tactics. And as far as operationally, we have mutual aid with all of them. So many times, if we get tied up on an incident, so we had an incident where we had a subject that was kind of barricading himself, and we were dealing with that. And so we asked Wilson to come in, and they actually handled a few calls for us here in the city, and vice versa. We'll do those things. So command structure, we have that mutual aid, and then at a high level, just so that we're always talking about what we're doing and how we're doing it, we meet at least once a month to go over that. We're also all members of PA Chiefs Association, International Chiefs, so we all meet through those organizations as well. Northampton County Chiefs meets usually every quarter, and sometimes more frequently, but so at a larger level, we meet there. So there's a lot of interoperability and communication between the departments for sure.
I also wanted to just say, when I grew up as a kid, my parents always said, your police officers, they're your friends. If you ever need help, that's who you go to, because they're going to help you. And I thought it was so reassuring to hear your attitude and your commitment to the people and to doing the right things and to keep us safe. It was very inspiring. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And that's a lot to live up to. That statement, I was told the same thing, and that's a lot to live up to. So I tell our guys that all the time. And I say guys, I mean all of our officers. I tell them that, when we deal with individuals, many times it's the worst day of their life. Whatever's going on for them, for us, it may be another call, but for them, it could be one of the worst moments of their life. And they should always remember that when they're trying to deal with individuals with empathy and those types of things to help them get through those times. They have to kind of continuously put that aside to say, the frequency of things that we deal with. And we are out now working with the United Way, and I had a chance to meet Chief Dillard up at Moravian College, the new chief up there, and Chief Kotz out in Bethlehem. And basically, we're now working towards, and Chief Rock in Allentown as well. We're working to basically what they call resiliency training for our officers, which help them deal with what they're going through as far as the continuous, things that they have to see and deal with. And the hope is that to start off dealing with these officers to make sure that they are mentally sound and that they're dealing with these things appropriately and in their best interest. And then in turn, training them to help individuals who are dealing with hardships also be resilient and deal with them as far as the mental capacity as well. So we're kind of starting to take that on a little bit more as it pertains to the mental illness side of things to make sure our officers are mentally sound when it comes to what they have to deal with. And then hopefully that translates out, and we'll do training then to make sure they're able to help others with that as well. So it's a big part of what we do. Well, again, thank you very much. I appreciate being here. Anybody has any, I'll be here. I'll eat quick. Anybody have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.